I'm glad you all are here tonight. As Eduardo said, inner transformation is something that we as Spiritists are always seeking to achieve. And it's a slow process for most of us. But how to be humble is something that I know I personally keep coming back to. Blessed are the poor in spirit. And we've heard Daniel, I believe, give a presentation on that very topic. And I know I have given one in the past too. So it's very important that we be able to achieve humility and get rid of our pride. So that's what we're going to talk about. And I want to give tell you who translated this. This part of this presentation is taken from a PDF document at spiritist.us. And it's Jusora Korngold. You all may have heard her name before. She's active in, I think it's the Spiritist Society of, or the New York? Yeah. That's not what they call it. They call it. Okay. So, and it's a really good translation. So I wanted to give her credit. So how can we overcome our pride and become humble? Well, the answer is quite simple and quite hard too, right? We can practice humility. Humility in action combats pride. Pride is our nature, and humility is something that we must learn, which is why we're here on earth, to learn. Humility is not a trait that comes naturally. Therefore, humility must be conscious choices that we integrate into our daily attempts to improve the way we live our lives. And if we work at it every day, slowly but surely, we will get rid of our pride and become more humble. And it's good to know, with our free will, that it's entirely our choice. We can either choose pride or we can choose humility. Every encounter we face each day can bring an element of pride with it and a chance to practice humility. We can choose to be forgiving, to receive counsel and render service to others, and to esteem others as much as ourselves. The golden rule, love your neighbor as yourself, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's what we're going for here. Have you ever heard this saying? No one ever choked to death swallowing his pride. Have you ever heard that? Swallow your pride? That means just admit that you were wrong. Admit that you need help. That's what it means to swallow your pride. And this smart aleck person that made this up is anonymous, of course, but he or she says no one ever choked to death swallowing his pride. So remember that saying. When you're feeling prideful, just go, I'm swallowing my pride and I'm going to be humble. Now, as I said at the beginning, this is based on Scripture, Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 and 3. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. And he said, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And we all know that verse, but do we know the meaning? When Jesus says the poor in spirit, he is speaking of those who possess the virtue of humility. And humility is a virtue. It's a good thing to have in your character. So that's what Jesus was getting at when he said, Blessed are the poor in spirit. He didn't mean they were poor spirits. He didn't mean they acted poor or that they were, poor instead of rich physically. He meant humble. He meant that the poor in spirit are humble, and theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, I promised last week that I was going to talk to you about Benjamin Franklin. So let's talk about him. Benjamin Franklin's 13 virtues is what we're going to talk about. And a virtue, again, is a good thing. Okay, so Benjamin Franklin lived from 1706 to 1790. He was one of the founding fathers of the United States. Franklin was a renowned author, printer, political theorist, politician, Freemason, which is a stone worker, postmaster, scientist, inventor, civic activist, statesman, and diplomat. Gee, I wonder why he couldn't find any time to do anything. As a scientist, he was a major figure in the American Enlightenment for his discoveries and theories regarding electricity. Everybody knows the story of how Benjamin Franklin goes out in the rainstorm with his kite. Have we heard that? Yeah. You haven't? Well, that's how he invented the lightning rod. I want to show you a picture of it in a second here. So now, as an inventor, which you can tell he really loved to do, he is known for the lightning rod, which a lightning rod keeps it attracts the lightning so it doesn't, hit your house and burn it down. That's what it's for. The Franklin stove, which I'll show you a picture of in a minute, and many other inventions. And he facilitated many civic organizations like the Philadelphia Fire Department and the University of Philadelphia. You can tell that Benjamin Franklin was probably a good man and very smart as well. There's a picture of what a Franklin stove looks like. Has anybody ever actually seen one in somebody's house? Because they still have them. Modernized versions, but it has the doors on the front that you can open it up and put the wood in there, and then it has the chimney at the top. So that's one of his inventions. And here's the lightning rod, which, as I said, that attracts the lightning so that it doesn't strike somewhere you don't want it to. And then, I think I didn't mention the bifocals earlier, but there's Ben wearing his own bifocals. Bifocals being his eyeglasses. Does anybody here wear bifocals? Yeah, so you have two different sets. When you look up, you look through the top part of the glasses and you can see fine. But when you read, you want to look through the bottom part, and then that's a different set of focals. So Benjamin Franklin invented that and obviously wore them as well. All right, now I want to tell you what Benjamin Franklin had to say about his 13 virtues. My list of virtues contained at first but 12, but a Quaker friend kindly informed me that I was generally thought proud, that my pride showed itself frequently in conversation, that I was not content with being in the right when discussing any point, but was overbearing and rather insolent, of which he convinced me by mentioning several instances. So I determined, endeavoring to cure myself, if I could, of this vice or folly among the rest, and I added humility to my list. So his goal was to become less prideful, less proud, and so that's why his Quaker friend, who was obviously a good friend and told him the truth, told him, "Hey, dude, you are too proud. You're always thinking you're better than everybody else. You're bragging." And so he took that to heart and added humility to his list of virtues. So let's look at the list of virtues, shall we? Temperance. Does anybody know what that is? Dave, you know what temperance is. Back during the 20s? I mean the 30s? Not drinking alcohol, exactly. Silence, which we talk about a lot in Spiritism, how silence can be better than speaking out. Order, resolution, we talk about a lot in Spiritism. Frugality, meaning you're thrifty, you don't spend too much money. Industry, which means you work a lot. Sincerity, and justice, which we also talk about a lot in Spiritism, divine justice, and moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, which means you don't have sex so much, and finally, he added humility. So those are Ben Franklin's 13 virtues. Pretty good ones, don't you think? Something we should all strive for. So, in the same presentation I was talking to you about that Jusara Korngold translated, she cites Wikipedia. There's a wiki that tells us how to be humble. And you see the address. It's WikiHow is what it is, wikihow.com. And it offers us great insights in how to be humble. So let's take a look at what Wiki tells us to do. Appreciate your talents. Being humble doesn't mean you can't feel good about yourself. Self-esteem is not the same as pride. We must esteem ourselves before we can have esteem for anyone else, not true esteem. So it's not the same thing as pride. We can say that we're proud of ourselves, and that doesn't mean we're prideful. It means we have good self-esteem. Both come from recognition of your own talents and qualities. Pride, however, the kind of pride that leans toward arrogance, is rooted in insecurity about yourself. Think about the abilities you have and be thankful for them. We don't always do that. Number 2, conduct an honest evaluation of yourself. Honesty with yourself is the best policy. If you know you are weak in a certain area, your enemies will not be able to have that power over you because you know it's there and you're working on it and your enemies can't touch you. Understand your limitations. Even if you are the best in the world at doing one thing, there are other important, worthwhile things that you cannot do and that you may never be able to do. For example, just to make myself an example, I am never going to run a marathon in my whole life. I know that. But am I sad about it? No, because I have other things that I am good at. So that's kind of how we have to weigh it. We want to be realistic, in other words, about what we can and cannot do. Resignation doesn't mean giving up on learning new things or improving your existing abilities. There we go. All right. Number 4, recognize your own faults. We judge others because it's a lot easier than looking for our own faults. And this can often be unproductive and even harmful. We make judgments about others all the time, don't we? And we often don't even realize we're doing it. So here's a little exercise for you. Next time you start to judge someone, try to catch yourself in the act of judging another person or group of people, and instead turn it back on yourself and judge yourself and consider how you can improve. That's a good exercise, isn't it? And Wiki says number 5 is stop comparing. Well, why? Well, because it's just about impossible to be humble when we're always striving to be the best or trying to beat somebody or be better than others. So let go of meaningless, simplistic comparisons, and you'll be able to enjoy doing things without worrying about whether you're better or worse at them than anybody else. Just enjoy it for yourself, and don't compare yourself to others. So they're different from you. They may enjoy it in a different way. So just enjoy it for yourself and for your own well-being. Number 6, appreciate the talents and qualities of others. Challenge yourself to look at others and appreciate the things they can do, and more generally, to appreciate people for who they are. Train yourself to separate your opinions from your fears, and you will appreciate others more. You will be humbler. This is step 6. It can be hard. As it says, we have to train ourselves to separate our opinions from our fears. Don't be afraid of someone else just because they're different, in other words. Number 7, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Never be afraid to admit that you made a mistake. Part of being humble is to understand that you and also others will make mistakes. Understand this, and you will have a heavy burden lifted off of you. It gives you an out, because everybody makes mistakes. We all do it every day. So don't be so hard on yourself when you do make a mistake, and don't be afraid to admit that you did. What's the worst that could happen? Somebody would say to you, your friend might say, oh, that's okay, you'll do it better next time. So, why do we make mistakes? Well, because we don't know everything. And we're not meant to know everything at this point in our existence. The spirits tell us this, right? In the Spirit's book, doesn't it say that God does not intend for us to know everything? Correct? Is that correct? Yeah. And we know, just from living as human beings on the earth, that we certainly don't know everything about everything. So that sometimes we're going to make mistakes. But don't be hard on yourself. Just learn from it and go from there. Now, number 8, don't be afraid to defer to others' judgment. It's easy to acknowledge that you made a mistake. It's more difficult, however, to acknowledge that in many cases, someone else may be right. So it's not enough just to say, oh, I made a mistake. You have to be ready to admit that somebody else was right and you weren't. Deferring to your spouse's wishes, Melissa and Daniel. To a law you don't agree with, Eduardo. Or even sometimes to your child's opinion, Melissa and Daniel. Raises your recognition of your limitations to a different level. So you learn from those experiences. You learn to that you're not losing anything if Melissa wants to stay home on Saturday night and watch No Solar, and you don't. But if you defer to her wishes, that makes you a better person. It makes her happy, and that's great. So these kinds of things make us grow and learn. Now, number 9, seek guidance. Contemplate moral texts like the Gospel according to Spiritism and Proverbs about humility. Pray for it. Meditate on it. Do whatever it takes to get your attention off yourself. There's that word that we don't want to be selfish. We want to be humble, and we don't want to be selfish. If you're not into spirituality, Jusara says, consider the scientific method. Science requires humility. And that's kind of an interesting statement, and it tells us why. It requires that you let go of your preconceived notions and judgments and understand that you don't know as much as you think you do. And when you do, say you're a scientist in a lab, you're doing an experiment, and you thought you knew what the outcome was going to be, but it was something totally different. You have to have the humility and the humbleness to say, oh, wow, I'm glad I found that out. I didn't know that. So science does require humility. Number 10, think about yourself under different circumstances. Much of what we give ourselves credit for is actually a product of destiny. We reap what we sow. We've said that in here many times. We reap what we sow in this life and in the lives to come. And in our past lives we have. Help others. A big part of being humble is respecting others, and part of respecting others is helping them. Treat other people as equals and help them because it is the right thing to do. It's been said that when you can help others who cannot possibly help you in return. You have learned humility. And that's how we learn as spiritists. When we do something kind or nice for another person, we don't expect something in return. That's not true charity. True charity is when you can do something, I like the way they put that, when we can help others who cannot possibly help us in return. I think that's a really nice summation of it right there. Remain teachable. Find people you aspire to be like in certain areas and ask them to mentor you. An unteachable spirit is a proud spirit. Why is that? Because they think they know already. It's the opposite of humility. So remain teachable. Remain open to new ideas, whatever they may be. And ultimately you will decide if this is something good for you or not. But the idea of getting a mentor is really helpful as well. In 2010, when I first began coming to the Spiritist Center, way before that, Eduardo was my mentor. I asked him to be, and he agreed, and he sat with me at Starbucks and read the gospel and explained things to me, and we studied together, and by the time he let me come to my first meeting, I was prepared. I knew what was to be expected of me as a spiritist. And Lord knows I don't know by a long shot everything at all. But it was very beneficial for me to have a mentor like someone who's experienced like Eduardo. So that's what they're talking about when they say find yourself a mentor. Practice gentleness. Gentleness of spirit is the sure path to humility. Whenever possible, when faced with conflict, absorb the venom from others' attacks and react with gentleness and respect. You don't want to start shouting back at them or saying curses at them because they're cursing you. No, that's not the way we want to be. Treat them with kindness. And the more you do that, the more that person is going to realize, hey, maybe they've got something here. You know, you're setting a good example by doing that. Okay, keep in mind that being humble has many benefits. Humility can help you be more content with your life, and it can also help you endure bad times and improve your relationship with others. Humility is also, somewhat counterintuitively, an excellent tool for self-development in general. After all, if you feel superior, you have no incentive to improve. So if you're humble, this leads you to seek to improve yourself because you don't think you know everything. So that's very important. Humility is also essential to being an effective learner. If you think you know it all, you won't be open-minded enough to seek out new knowledge. And what was number 12? Remain teachable. That's what this is talking about. Stay open to new knowledge and new ideas, other people's new ideas. Here we go. Andre Luis, in case you don't know, and I'm sure all of you do, was a Spiritist philosopher and author of one of our favorite books, Nos Hogar, which in English means our home. The principles that I'm going to mention that Andre Luis had regarding humility are from this book, Spiritist Path, which was psychographed by Chico Xavier through the spirit Andre Luis. And psychography, in case you are new to that, is the production of writing through a spirit by the hand of a medium. In other words, the medium, the spirit speaks to the medium, and the medium writes it out. And that's what Chico did. And he wrote, over 400 books. So, and they weren't all psychographs. I think he probably wrote some things that were just his own ideas as well. But a lot of them were psychographs. And there's just a little kind of example, a depiction of what it might be, with the person, the psychographer, sitting at the table, and then the spirit talking to him. That's just kind of a representation. So let's talk about Andre Luis. What do we know about him?